I'm Alex Campbell and I work for Monster Energy Star Racing Yamaha, and today we're going to go over Dylan Ferrandis' YZ450F race bike. Starting at the controls, we use Pro Taper handlebars. He uses Wyndham/RM mid bar with the race 1/3 soft grips. Uses grip donuts, and on the throttle grip he has a small plastic piece that's a production part that comes from Yamaha, but we add it to the right side throttle grip so it doesn't flex as much on his thumb or like get caught on the throttle housing. The right side of his handlebar, we actually cut it what the thickness of the throttle tube is, because he's so control sensitive and front end sensitive that if I don't trim the right side of the handlebar, he'll think the front end isn't straight, because his right hand is further over than his left would be compared to center of the motorcycle. Arc clutch perch setup, he uses standard pull for the lever, and it's a rigid lever, so it's a complete billet part that's anodized black. Inside the bar pad, there's a little hole cut in the bar pad and in the bar pad cover, and there's just a little red button in there, and that is for launch control on the start. And the reason we have it in the bar pad is because it has a little rubber cover on it, and he wears an outside of the jersey chest protector, and if you put it on the handlebar, it can be ripped off. Like that little rubber cover and stuff like that and the hard plastic on his chest protector come together, and he rips them off all the time. So Hutch, guy in-house at Yamaha, he does our wiring, and he made the wire shorter so it can go right there inside the bar pad, and then I don't have to keep replacing them. And those are just 3D printed pieces around there just so they don't get ripped off or accidentally hit. Pretty simple, but they're just glued on there, and yeah, they last as long as the button does, so it works out well. Throttle tube is a G2 throttle tube, and on the inside of the throttle tube where it runs on the handlebar has like Delrin in there, which is like a plastic, makes it really light pull, and Dylan runs absolutely zero throttle free play. Tight, if you turn the handlebars all the way to the left, the throttle has zero play in it. He's always rode like that, even on the 250, just no play in the throttle. Neck and triple clamps are solid neck and triple clamps. The standard Yamaha comes with 22s, and that's what we're running for Supercross. For outdoors, I would imagine we'll change either the offset or the races in there, but for Supercross, we run a standard setup there. We use KYB PSF1 air fork. On the right side, you'll see the Works Connection hole shot device in there. As far as the depth on the hole shot device, it is in a pretty standard location compared to the other riders. Malcolm's is a little bit lower than Dylan's. This is actually where we ran it on the 250 as well, just because you don't want to have the front clamp down too far and start stealing traction from the rear. The front axle is titanium. We use a Kite lightweight hub and Kite heavy duty spokes, and then a Excel rim. Front axle lugs are standard, so they're a cast piece. For the front brake system, we use a Batfly rotor from Braking, 270 rotor, and then a Works caliper. And the caliper actually has a brake hanger that is made in-house by our machinist Bob. And the reason for that is just to work with the Works caliper and the stock fork lug. Pistons are bigger, just that's part of the Works caliper option, but you can get them bigger. So this one has a 27 and a 30 millimeter piston in the front brake caliper, and you can get them up to 30 and 30, I believe. This is a good caliper. Dylan really likes the feel of it, and then he also runs a different master cylinder on the front brake. So instead of the stock Yamaha one, he has a different one that comes from Nissan, and it is a little bit bigger piston in the master cylinder and just has a little bit better feel. And the reason for that is he runs his front brake lever so close to his knuckles that if he ran a smaller piston, it doesn't have as much bite before it touches his fingers. Like if there was to be any brake fade, he wouldn't be able to pull the lever. The brake has to be bled perfectly, and then it has to have that little bit bigger piston just to get the feel. Standard brake line is the Yamaha piece. We just take the sheathing off of it to just make it look a little bit more sleek, and then it's lightweight. Front tire is a spec Dunlop front tire, and then also on the front you'll see the Lightspeed rotor cover there. It's a nice piece for racing, keep the rotor a little more protected. In front of the radiator louvers, we have a little twin air screen on there. It's pretty small, and you can buy these, I believe, on their website, but it keeps any big pieces of mud or rocks out, even small rocks. It lets a little bit of sand through, and it doesn't like slow the airflow down at all, so it's not like hindering it at all in that way. The radiator cooling fins like keeps them from getting bent up all the time. It's just a really lightweight screen on there. It's nice. So we have a different radiator cap on the right side there, and it's a 1.8, and the stock bike comes with a 1.1 just to allow for a little bit more pressure. Radiator hose on the right side where it comes out of the head. There's a billet piece there that Bob makes in-house, which is lightweight, but also gets rid of where the water temp sensor comes production, because we move our water temp sensor into the hose, which less likely to fail when it's in the hose and is a little more dampening for the sensor rather than being right on the headpiece there. On the right side, on the upper triple clamp, you'll see one of the bolts is a little bit longer, and there's a small black bracket on there, and that is for the AMA's transponder. We have that just to be a little bit better fit and finish there. The airbox we use is a twin air power flow kit. They also offer that on their website. So it runs a little bit different style air filter, kind of like the old bike did, instead of the flat one that the Yamaha comes with, and it allows for a little more airflow. And then in the hood, we use a Cycra hood, and we cut out a hole in the center behind the neck, which kind of hidden from debris and stuff like that, but still allows more air in there. Filter from Twin Air that is a little bit thinner and not as dense foam. That is for Supercross, and then for outdoors we use our standard filter because of just the conditions really. Outdoors is pretty gnarly. Fuel, we use VP Pro 6 fuel. Don't use the HT stuff for Supercross, and depending on the temperature, if we will, for outdoors. On the right side frame spar, we have a auxiliary start button in case the one up on the handlebar was to get broken, kind of just a safety measure. Lightspeed glide plate underneath protects the water pump on the right side, and then the case is underneath from any debris coming in there because the stock Yamaha doesn't come with a skid plate. And then on the left side, it kind of tucks up around the ignition cover a little bit there too, to keep anything from hitting the left side of the engine. We use the piece to hold the skid plate on, the glide plate on, just goes around the frame rather than welding that piece to the frame. It isn't like so rigid. So the foot pegs are Raptor foot pegs. These ones come from Great Britain. In the center, there's for Dylan. Malcolm uses another row of teeth in the middle, but for Dylan, he uses just the outer edge of teeth, and it keeps him from plugging up with mud a little bit, and then it kind of allows his foot to sink down in the foot peg and get more traction that way. We use titanium foot peg mounts, a stock spring, but a tie foot peg pin as well. Just a standard shifter on the left side. It's nothing done to it, it's not extended or anything like that. And the reason we use the stock one is because instead of like a billet piece, it'll bend, and then if you try bending it back, it'll snap. Whereas like in Orlando, Dylan's shifter bent, he was able to pull in, and after a few seconds, I was able to have it bent back out, and rather than snapping off, you can bend it back rather than the billet one where it would snap. So the engines are done in-house. Engine builder, Brian Kelma, he does practice and race engines there. Spec is made up by Brad and Jeremy Coker, and then Kelma himself. Our engines do 3 rounds of Supercross as long as there's no extreme conditions or anything like that. And then we always have a spare in the truck and then one in transit, you know, the first week after, and then it'll normally be back. But Dylan isn't hard on the engines or anything like that. Really easy on the clutch too. Coming up from the 250, Dylan's kind of like is surprised by the power sometimes, so he doesn't like it to be like super aggressive or anything like that, just because coming from the 250, it was like obviously a lot more than he was used to. As Supercross has gone on, we've kind of tuned it up a little bit, but just by mapping and things like that, like nothing wild like as far as parts. Inside the engine, crank is helped designed by Crankworks Incorporated. On the engine cases, we use titanium bolts where it could get hit with a rock or any type of debris on the track. And then the ones that are a little more protected, or we don't take them on and off on a race day, are aluminum bolts to save weight. And so you'll see the difference in the bolts. Like on the clutch cover, we have titanium ones. On the primary cover, they're aluminum, just to save a little bit of weight, because the only person that takes those on and off are the engine builder, and he torques them once, and they don't really have to be super duper strong, whereas the clutch cover ones do, because we have it on and off quite a few times throughout a race weekend. Works Yamaha wiring harness because it's slimmed down and a lot easier to use, like as far as putting it on and off and stuff like that, and it's lightweight. And then at the races, we can tune through the ECU. We use a Vortex ignition system, and we can do a lot of things through the ignition to help either tune the bike down a little bit or try and pick it back up if Dylan's looking for a little more power in a certain area, or if he needs something in third or fourth that he doesn't need in second, we can do it all that way too, with different gears and stuff like that. The clutch springs, we use a Recluse clutch system, core manual system, and then he uses the gold springs and then one red spring as well. 5 of the springs are the medium stiffness, and then the one red one is the stiffest. The swing arm pivot is titanium, and then on each side we have Delrin pressed in there. That way no mud or anything can get in there. On the right side, you'll see a small hole in there, and that's just so when I check my clutch, I can slide a little piece of aluminum in there. It holds the brake pedal down. That's all that little hole is for, just so it holds the brake pedal down and out of the way to get the clutch cover off. And on the brake pedal, we have a brake snake off the front of the tip there, just so if it gets hit on a tough block or a rut or anything like that, it can't get bent out. And then on the back side of the brake pedal underneath, we have a small piece welded on there that's threaded and a bolt going into it, just in case the brake pedal was to get hit upward upward. It doesn't rip the guts out of the master cylinder in the rear. Right above the pedal, return spring built into like the bottom of the master cylinder, and it's just a little bit stiffer return spring, and then it's a little bit more fail-proof compared to the stock one that comes off the frame into the brake pedal. No window on the rear master cylinder, just use the little line on the inside for fluid-wise. We bleed our brakes so much that you're not looking at your fluid to see if it's low or if it's black or anything like that. The rear master cylinder is the production size, it's just that it has no window at all. The rear brake line is production, just one small piece of sheathing we take off that, and that's just for weight and makes it look a little cleaner. Full titanium exhaust system from FMF, and then that guard on the right side by the knee areas there, just so it doesn't get dented in or anything like that from his leg. A pretty short exhaust system. The production one is longer, but this is one that we've developed in-house. Brad and the guys at FMF have came up with that. It kind of looks sleek hidden behind the number plate right there. Dylan's seat is a production seat pan and seat foam, and then there's just a small hump on there, which I make out of a bar pad. I just hand shape them on the belt sander. And then the seat cover has no ribs. Some riders like ribs all the way through the seat cover or halfway through it, and he runs no ribs. Dylan likes a brand new seat. The subframe is lowered 5 millimeters. It's a production subframe, and then Bryce, our in-house fabricator, he shortens it 5 millimeters and then welds it back on there. The rear shock is a KYB kit shock with a titanium spring, and then the shaft is DLC coated. The linkage is a linkage that is made in-house on the CNC here at Yamaha. It is a little bit different ratio for Supercross, and then also inside the pull rod we have a different bushing in there that's lightweight, so it's steel where the bearing needles run, but in the middle it's aluminum just to save a little bit of weight on that inside collar there. On the rear brake caliper we have a huge carbon guard on there just for Supercross and block passing and things like that, just to keep it from getting hit during those types of moments. Rear brake rotor is a production brake rotor. It's made by Braking, and that's everybody's bike from the showroom. It comes with the braking rotor on there. Titanium rotor bolts there. Kite lightweight hub, and then the spokes on the rear are OW spokes, which are Works Yamaha spokes, which are heavy duty and heavy duty nipples as well. Excel rim in the rear as well. Use Dunlop heavy duty tubes front and rear for Supercross, that is. It's pretty crazy the abuse they can take because of how flattened out the tire gets. Because spec tires, you know, they're so soft. Dylan, we use a spec tire in the rear as well. Depends on the track, if it's a 120 or a 110, just on track conditions, if it's slippery or tacky or if the loops are really edgy. Sprockets are made by Vortex. Runs a 1351 gearing and a Vortex chain as well. We use a master link, not very common in the 450 class I feel like, but we've had no issues with the chain and works out well for us. Lightspeed carbon chain guide on there. The ignition cover is made by GYTR, and that's something that anybody can buy online, and it just adds a lot of strength to the left side of the engine there. The stock one isn't a big issue, but in close quarters racing, or if you're riding in the rocks or off-road or anything like that, the GYTR one's much stronger. The case saver we use is just a production aluminum piece. It takes a big plastic piece off there, but then we just use aluminum bolts on the cases. That way if something was to get in there, it snaps the bolt instead of wrecking the case. The engine mounting is, we have that tie pivot in and then tie bolts throughout. There's no steel bolts mounting the engine or anything like that, but the head hangers are production, those are steel, and then the front plates are also production, those are aluminum. It's exactly how they come. Tie bolts holding it in there. Clutch cable down there where it mounts to the engine. We have a billet piece holding the cable to the engine, and then also a billet piece that's bolted through the starter motor covering up the clutch cable. That way no debris can get in behind the clutch cable, kind of stop the clutch from being able to return. All the frame bracketry is made by FMF. The reason they're making them for us is because they make them out of titanium just for lightweight rather than the steel ones that the stock Yamaha comes with. And we use the brackets on the upper left of the frame where the kill switch clips to the frame there. The reg rec on the left side of the frame as well is bolted to a titanium piece. Saved a lot of weight on the bike this year. All that little stuff matters at that point. Cycloplastics all the way front to back on the bike. We cover those up with some decor graphics, and we use the matte graphics so they're not so glossy and shiny, and then they're a little bit lighter just because they don't have that sheet of clear over them.